Hello and welcome to the Luv Doc podcast with hosts Waldo Wachewski and Ophelia Bruschi.
Today, we've got a single...
profound piece of writing, honestly.
It really is. It's a remarkably candid Q&A from the Luv Doc titled, A Tale as Old as Time.
And our mission's really to explore how this highly specific interaction strips everything away. Like, it strips away all the performative nonsense we usually associate with making connections.
Yeah, all the fake dating roles.
Exactly. And what it leaves us with is this genuinely profound blueprint for navigating social awkwardness, regardless of, how your brain is actually wired.
So let's set the stage with the protagonist of this column. She signs her letter with this incredible, super self-deprecating moniker. She calls herself Useless Les.
Which is just a great pen name.
It is. And she paints a very clear picture of who she is right out of the gate. She says she's an 18-year-old high school student. She's gay. She's a self-described big old nerd. And she is autistic.
And she lays out her core conflict with just brutal honesty. I mean, she has absolutely zero idea how to flirt or how to even go about finding girls who like girls.
She writes, tale as old as time, gay girl can't tell when ladies are flirting with her. Which, I mean, that is just a wonderfully self-aware statement for someone who's still in high school.
Oh, totally. She clearly understands her own blind spots. And she introduces that blindfolded darts analogy immediately to explain, what flirting actually feels like through the lens of autism.
Yeah, she is essentially asking the doc for a way to just take the blindfold off.
Yeah.
She wants to know where to go, what spaces to occupy, and the actual mechanics of figuring out if someone harbors romantic interest in her.
But before we get to the heavy, life-altering advice...
we have to talk about the postscript.
Yes, exactly. We have to talk about how she ends her letter. She includes this witty little note at the end. She asks the Luv Doc, do people ever say, "What's up, Doc," to you? And if they do, is it annoying or funny to you?
Which feels like, I don't know, a totally natural, somewhat cheeky question to ask an advice columnist with that specific name.
Yeah.
I probably would have asked the same thing.
Oh, for sure. But the doc's reaction to this is just extreme. I mean, it's delivered with absolute deadpan seriousness. He tells her that he's hugely relieved. People rarely make that joke.
And he diagnoses himself with a condition.
Yeah, he says he has RSF, resting snark face.
I can picture that perfectly, honestly.
Right. And then he paints this elaborate, highly specific, hypothetical scenario. He says, imagine someone pops into his office and says, "Whoa, smells like Up Doc in here."
Like the classic cheesy beat and switch joke.
Exactly.
It reminds me of that Andy Bernard joke from The Office. Like someone is just begging you to ask, "What's up, Doc?" so they can deliver the punchline.
Yeah, but the doc says he absolutely refuses to play along with it. He says he would just leave the person hanging.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they would be forced to stand in front of his desk in this painfully awkward silence, just marinating in his cold, humorless gaze for what feels like an eternity.
That sounds agonizing.
It does. And he goes further. He says if the person tried to desperately explain the joke, saying something like, "Get it, Up Doc," he would quietly stand up, walk down the hall, and literally lock himself in the bathroom until the building's security team ushers the joke teller out of the premises.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. Because I read that entire sequence and I immediately thought, why?
Yeah, it's a lot.
It is. Why does the doc spend a massive chunk of this rather short advice column outlining a hyper-detailed, borderline aggressive, comedic bit about locking himself in a bathroom to avoid a bad joke?
It does seem a bit disproportionate.
Right. Like, is he just dodging her actual vulnerable question about dating? It feels like a stand-up comedian spending 10 minutes destroying a heckler before getting to their actual material. It seems completely disconnected from her problem.
So look at the typical dynamic between an adult advice columnist and a teenager. It almost always drips with condescension. That whole, "Oh, sweetie, you'll figure it out when you're older," Coney.
Ugh, yeah, that is the worst.
But the doc bypasses that completely. He is doing something highly intentional with this long tangent. He even notes that because she is autistic, she probably wouldn't even register that awkward, drawn-out silence he'd subject the joke teller to anyway.
Right.
He is matching her directness. By doing this bit, he is establishing a boundary of radical, unfiltered honesty right from the start.
So by dedicating so much real estate to this absurd bit, he's actually treating her as an intellectual equal.
Precisely. He explicitly says he's using the "you" in that scenario rhetorically because he knows she is clearly better than that. He's trusting an 18-year-old to track with high-level sarcasm.
That makes a lot of sense. So by establishing this blunt, completely unfiltered tone, he creates a seamless pivot.
Think about the psychological maneuvering he's doing here. He moves from a joke about what he absolutely will not tolerate, an unoriginal try-hard joke, straight into a very stark, very vulnerable admission of what he doesn't know.
Wow, yeah. He sets the standard that there will be no fake pleasantries in this conversation, which clears the runway for him to just admit his own ignorance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is where the column takes a really fascinating turn. The doc decides to, in his words, keep it 100. He just straight up admits that his knowledge of autism is highly limited and honestly probably riddled with inaccurate stereotypes.
Yeah, he makes this joke where he says he's pretty sure he knows more lesbians than he does autistic people. But then he catches himself and says, maybe that's just because autistic people don't drive Subarus and dress like lumberjacks. Like, he literally asks if autistic people could work harder on branding.
The visual contrast he sets up there is just brilliant.
But wait, isn't that incredibly risky? I mean, for an authority figure, someone whose literal job is to provide answers, to lean on these massive cliché stereotypes like Subarus and lumberjacks.
It seems like it would be.
And more than that, to blatantly admit to a vulnerable reader that he might not have a serviceable amount of knowledge to actually help her. It seems like professional suicide for an advice columnist to say, I have no idea what I'm talking about.
Well, what's fascinating here is that the risk is the exact mechanism of his success. Because think about it, advice givers usually project total omniscience. They feel this intense pressure to have a tidy solution for every demographic.
Right, they have to be the expert on everything.
Exactly. But by highlighting the absurdity of these visual shortcuts, the so-called lesbian branding with Subarus and lumberjacks, against the complete invisibility of autistic branding, he validates her disorientation. He is pointing out a structural disadvantage she actually faces in the social world.
Oh, I see. So she is navigating a landscape where the road signs don't make sense to her, and he is confirming that the road signs are, in fact, completely ridiculous.
Yes. He's essentially telling her, you feel like you're playing blindfolded darts. Well, I don't have the magical autism lesbian handbook either. We are both in the dark here.
That is surprisingly comforting.
It is. By completely stripping away the pretense of being an expert on her highly specific intersection of identities, he forces the conversation to shift. He cannot give her niche demographic-specific advice, so he is forced to elevate his advice to a universal level.
And he anchors it all on the one identity she claimed that he actually does intimately understand, being a big old nerd.
Are you currently unclothed? Yeesh, that's only cool at certain resorts on the French Riviera, Hippie Hollow, and your backyard. But only if you have one of those slowly rotting wooden privacy fences your creepy neighbor likes to leer over while he's watering his rosebush. Otherwise, if you want to win friends and influence enemies, you need to get outfitted in some sick merch from the Luv Doc shop at thepleasurecraft.com. Are you a hard fit? We got you, boo. Plus, there are a variety of styles and colors that can accommodate any levels of uncoolness, even yours. So make a sensible fashion decision and hightail it to the Luv Doc shop at thepleasurecraft.com. Your body is counting on you.
So if the specific, stereotypical road signs are useless to her, where does that leave her? This forces the doc to completely strip the word nerd of its traditional baggage.
And he admits he's missed the mark with his own metaphorical blindfolded darts in the past and caused collateral damage himself.
Right, he's humanizing himself even more.
Exactly. So to help her avoid that damage, he offers what he calls easy layups to pad her dating stats. He provides two very specific, highly stereotyped environments as examples.
Yeah, he tells her she could buy season tickets to the Texas women's basketball games because they're going to the Final Four. Or she could just go get a job at a U-Haul store.
Which is him leaning hard into those lesbian stereotypes again.
Totally. But there's a massive catch to this advice. He explicitly states that these flaming hot tips are completely 100% useless unless those are things she's actually into.
And this brings us to his redefinition of the word nerd. Because he doesn't define a nerd by a specific interest like, comic books or tabletop games. He defines it as an attitude.
Okay, an attitude. How so?
It's about unabashedly owning and celebrating your passions, regardless of what anyone else thinks about them. He calls this unabashed enthusiasm sexy stuff, and claims it is a universally attractive quality.
I have to push back on this a little bit, though. Let's look at the actual mechanics of his advice here. Isn't just be yourself and do what you love the most cliché, overused advice in the history of the world?
I mean, yes, it usually is.
Right. Like if she takes a job at a U-Haul store just to find a girlfriend, but all she actually wants to do is talk about sci-fi novels, she's going to be surrounded by people she has nothing in common with.
A recipe for disaster.
Exactly. But just telling her to be a nerd doesn't seem like actionable advice for someone who says they are actively failing at dating.
I get why you'd say that. It sounds cliche on the surface, but we really need to distinguish between passive existence and active enthusiasm.
Okay, tell me more.
The doc isn't saying be yourself in a passive, sit on the couch and wait for the universe to deliver a soulmate kind of way. He is completely reframing her nerdiness. Because in high school, nerdiness is often framed as a social liability.
Oh, 100%. It's something you are taught to hide so you can blend in.
Right. But the doc is telling her that her nerdiness is actually her greatest asset, but only if it's active.
So let's try to visualize how this active enthusiasm actually works in the real world. I kind of think of it like a radio frequency.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah. So the typical advice is to broadcast on a generic, middle-of-the-road frequency, hoping as many people as possible tune in. You try to be, universally palatable.
Right, trying to be what everyone wants.
Exactly. What the doc is suggesting is the exact opposite of that. He's saying, crank the volume all the way up on your one highly specific weird frequency.
Yes.
And it is going to recreate a lot of annoying static for 99% of the people who walk by. But the 1% of people who are actually looking for that exact station will hear it loud and clear.
That is a perfect analogy. And let's actually view this through the psychological lens of masking.
Okay, masking.
Yeah. Neurodivergent individuals often spend an immense amount of cognitive energy mimicking neurotypical behaviors just to fit into standard social environments.
Which sounds exhausting.
It is incredibly exhausting. If she takes that hypothetical job at the U-Haul store just to meet someone, she is committing to masking full time. The cognitive load of maintaining a fake persona is massive, and honestly, it rarely leads to genuine connection anyway.
Because they're connecting with the mask, not the real person.
Precisely. The doc is essentially advising her to unmask early. Active enthusiasm acts as a polarizing filter. It aggressively repels the people who don't get it and acts as a massive magnet for the people who do.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
And the doc also throws in a crucial reality check for her here. He reminds her that she is a freshly minted adult.
That's such an important point.
He explicitly tells her not to feel rushed just because her hetero classmates are out there hooking up and seemingly figuring it all out. That is such a heavy burden when you are 18, the feeling that everyone else was handed a rule book that you never received.
Taking that temporal pressure off is vital for her. It allows her to focus on building her own joy and exploring her own passions, rather than frantically trying to force a connection in a space where she doesn't naturally belong, just to keep pace with her peers.
Okay, so let's play out the scenario where she follows this advice perfectly.
Okay, let's do it.
She is out there, she is unmasked, she is actively enthusiastic and confidently owning her passions in a space she genuinely loves. Her specific radio frequency is blasting.
She's doing everything right.
Right. But we still have to answer the final, most practical question she asked in her letter. How does an 18-year-old autistic girl actually spot the connection when the magnet works? Like, how does she know if they do like her?
This is where the doc's advice shifts from philosophical to brilliantly, brutally practical. He gives her a metric that doesn't rely on subtle social cues at all.
Thank goodness.
Right. He tells her, you'll know someone likes you when you simply can't seem to get rid of them. They will keep finding excuses to be around you.
Wait, I'm stuck on this, though. He tells her not to rely on cues, but then says you'll know they like you if they won't leave you alone. Isn't someone constantly hovering around you also a social cue you have to interpret?
Well, yes and no.
Like, how is she supposed to know the difference between a really clingy platonic friend and a genuine romantic interest if she's ignoring all the standard physical flirting signals?
So we culturally assume that the neurotypical system of flirting actually works. Lingering glances, subtle tone shifts, light physical touches.
That's what we see in all the movies.
Exactly. But it doesn't actually work, as the doc points out. Even neurotypical people constantly misread flirting. It is a system built on highly inefficient, ambiguous data points.
That is so true. Everyone is confused by flirting.
Exactly. So someone hovering around you is a data point, but it's a structural one, not a subtle one. Physical proximity is undeniable. It doesn't require decoding a microexpression.
Okay, I see. But how does she bridge the gap between this person is always around and this person actually wants to date me?
By understanding that flirting is often just a defensive mechanism. People use it to test the waters without risking outright rejection. The doc's ultimate advice is to bypass that broken system entirely.
Oh, wow. Just skip the game.
Skip the game. For someone who explicitly struggles to read a room, Trying to decode a lingering glance is a complete waste of energy. His solution to the hovering friend is directness and sincerity.
So just ask them?
Just ask them. When someone won't leave your orbit, you don't need to look harder for a subtle clue. You just need to be direct. Trade the confusion of flirting for the vulnerability of directness.
I love that. Sincerity is what actually takes the blindfold off in the dark game.
It cuts through the noise entirely. Directness eliminates the need for the subtle, choreographed dance that leaves so many people feeling alienated. If you ask a direct question, you get a direct answer, and all that agonizing guesswork just evaporates.
That is so powerful. Let's summarize the journey for you, the listener. What started as a highly specific niche question from an 18-year-old autistic lesbian who just wanted to know how to navigate the dating world turned out to be a masterclass in human connection.
Because the mechanics of the doc's advice apply to almost every social scenario, not just dating.
Exactly. Whether you are trying to find a romantic partner, trying to make new friends in an unfamiliar city, or just trying to exist comfortably in your own skin, the core principles remain the exact same.
You don't need a perfectly curated brand.
Right. You do not need to curate a perfect, easily digestible brand. You don't need to force yourself to hang out in spaces that feel unnatural to you, like the proverbial U-Haul store or the basketball game, just because you think that's where the people you want are supposed to be.
The ultimate strategy for finding your people is leaning into your unapologetic enthusiasm. Whatever your nerddom is, whatever your weird frequency is, broadcast it loudly.
Because it reduces the cognitive load of pretending to be someone you aren't.
Yes, and it naturally filters the people around you.
So let your genuine passion be the beacon. Stop trying to perfectly execute the steps of a social dance when you don't even like the music playing in the room.
You know, it leaves you with a really fascinating question to consider moving forward.
What's that?
We spend so much of our lives trying to learn this meticulously choreographed dance of neurotypical dating and socializing, trying to read the subtle cues, trying to blend in.
Right, trying to follow the rules.
But if that dance is actually broken and relies on subtle cues that constantly result in miscommunications for everyone, are neurodivergent individuals who bypass the dance entirely in favor of radical, blunt sincerity actually the ones doing human connection right?
Wow. That is something to seriously think about the next time you find yourself trying desperately to read the room. Thank you for listening to the Luv Doc podcast.
To read the column that spawned this podcast, go to austinchronicle.com/columns/the Luv Doc. There are probably worse things to do with your time, right?